At the time, there were over 100,000 Vietnamese refugees incarcerated in several camps. So, there's High Island camp, there's um, Nay Khu Chau, Hai Ling Chau, Tung Chau, like there's a lot of camps. So it depends on which camp I would go to. If I go to the Hai Ling Chau camp, which was kind of like right in front of my apartment, but kind of like really far. So then there's a special kind of like government boat. Like so you get on that government boat and then you go straight to Hai Ling Chau, and then I would meet up with Pam there. And then we go to the camp, and then, we worked, depends. I mean, usually we work all day with a break for about an hour. And then we go back either to her place or my place. I would say we go to the camp 3 or 4 times a week. We go in there, and Pam would have, I don't know, like thousands of people waiting for her to give them the legal advice they need for their refugee status determination process. So, I mean, just to give people a bit of background, from 1975 to 1989, there was basically no screening of Vietnamese refugees. Any arrival would be given automatic refugee status, considered as genuine refugees, and therefore they be entitled to, not entitled, but they be eligible for resettlement in the West. So my dad left Vietnam into 1980. He hopped on a boat. He was on the high sea for 10 days, nearly died, got to Thailand, but he was in the camp for only 3 months. And then he got picked up by Australia and got resettled in Australia. Mm-hmm. But by 1989, there was really compassion fatigue. The end of the Cold War has ended. I mean, you've got to look at the Vietnamese boat people exodus and the history of it being intertwined with the Vietnam War and the US involvement, and therefore the international involvement. For many of us, we thought that, Vietnam War ended, people fled by boat, and then the US and Australia and Canada were just taking refugees. Well, it wasn't that simple. The Vietnam War was led by the US, but it was an international force, right? I mean, there were Filipino soldiers there were South Korean, there were Thais, there were Australians. So when the war ended, and when hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese had to flee because of persecution, including my family, basically the US called a meeting in Geneva, and it's called the 1979 Geneva Convention. So from 75 to 79, it was just like an ad hoc policy of taking in Vietnamese refugees. Mind you, they called at the time the Indochina refugees, because there were refugees from Laos and from Cambodia as well, because the civilian government was also overtaken in April in Cambodia by the Khmer Rouge. So there were lots of Vietnamese and Cambodians fleeing their homeland from 75 to 79.
Right.
And they fled to Hong Kong, they fled to the Philippines, they fled to wherever they could flee, to Indonesia, Malaysia, to Thailand. And the West did not take enough refugees in, so there was increasing swelling of the populations within the camps. And so you talk about hundreds of thousands of people, resulting in Malaysia being so fed up of it, just pushing boats out to the sea. They've made it to shore, they've made it safely to shore, but they would just be pushed out, and then they would get killed. And they would die on the high sea the second time. So because of this humanitarian disaster that was happening, the US called a meeting in Geneva with the international committee, meeting up, and they devised a plan. They basically said, look, anyone who arrives from countries like Cambodia or Vietnam will get automatic refugee status, and the asylum countries don't have to worry so much because the Western countries will take them.
Wow. And this was in 1989?
1979.
And 79.
And that policy lasted for 10 years, from 79 to 89. All arrivals would be just like housed for, months, and then
dispersed.
As it went by, it would be years. So by 1989, there were so many people already. So then again, they met up in Geneva, and they devised another plan